It's Q&A time. Sorry it's a bit late. Don't really have a good excuse, but I'm doing it now. This is my December Q&A, so I'll still do a January one later in January, but let's get right into it. Do you have a list of underrated movies you highly recommend that don't get enough love? Okay. I'd say Richard Ayoade's movies are pretty underrated. Submarine is a cult classic, I'd say. I don't know if I'd call it underrated. Like, I love that movie, but there is a following of people who also adore that movie. Maybe not enough people. So I guess that's an underwatched movie rather than an underrated movie. But his other more recent film, The Double, it's very different from Submarine. They're hardly comparable, but I liked that a lot, and that didn't do too well critically, I don't think. I get the complaints. It feels very almost student film, but I don't know. I think it's a really cool movie, and what's really cool about that is you can kind of see how Ayoade's influence, or how Ayoade's direction influenced Craig Roberts' directorial debut, Just Jim, which is another movie that I think is underrated. I think not a lot of people saw it, but I also think the people who saw it didn't like it very much. That's a movie that's, again, really cool, crazy. I've only seen it once, and I'm still not sure what to make of it. It's been a few years, and I've been meaning to rewatch it. It's very bizarre, but Craig Roberts does a surprisingly good job behind the camera, considering how young he is and the fact that this is his debut. Do you think plot holes can ruin a movie? Okay, so we're getting into this. So there's that Patrick Willems video about plot holes, and it's kind of the anti-YMS video. I think there's merit to both schools of thought. So I guess my take on it is that, what is my take on it? I think they can, if it's a movie in which the plot logistics, in which for some reason the movie relies on plot logistics and it just doesn't deliver on that. It's not very well thought out. If it's a concept film and it's not well thought out, then yes, I will say that can kind of ruin a movie. And I can see why YMS didn't like A Quiet Place. For instance, that was the big, in the comments of the Patrick Willems video, that's like the YMS video that's referenced the most from what I saw. However, I do think it can reach a point where it's sort of nitpicking, but I also think a lot of people call things that aren't plot holes. So like if a character does something that the viewer personally wouldn't do, they'll call that a plot hole. And that's not a plot hole. That's just the character being different from you. And YMS is guilty of that sometimes. Like he'll call a character, he'll say it's a plot, or I don't know if he'll call it a plot hole, but he'll complain if a character does something dumb. Especially in like Jeremy Saulnier's films, where that's kind of the point of the movie, that these people don't know what they're doing because they're just people who are in these situations. So that's my take on that. I think they can, but I don't think, I think the current plot hole culture is kind of dumb. Moving on. What critically acclaimed films do you think are highly overrated? Oh, I like that there's the underrated and overrated. So The Shawshank Redemption is a good movie. I like The Shawshank Redemption. However, I don't think it's the best movie ever made, and I don't know how it reached that point on IMDb. And obviously IMDb isn't the one metric of what makes a movie good, but considering The Shawshank Redemption is number one by like a decent margin, I don't know, it's like a 7 or 8 for me. It's a good movie. I like it a lot, but I'm repeating myself. I didn't love Good Will Hunting, but I would like to rewatch it because I don't think I was watching it with the right eye. It's been quite a few years since I saw that. Um, I'll go through a few more. I'll just look at the IMDb top 250 and say what I thought was overrated. Well, I should also clarify, overrated and underrated. People. I should clarify those terms are obviously people aren't rating it above or below what it should be. They're rating it how they think it should be rated, and that's fine. So for each individual person, it's not over or underrated, or they're not over or underrating it. So when I call something overrated or underrated, I just mean I don't necessarily agree with the general consensus on the film. I guess The Godfather Part 2 as well. I think it's great. I think the if it were just a film about Vito, basically the flashbacks, if that were the whole movie, I think it would be great. But I do think the modern day stuff drags a little, which sort of hinders the film overall. And there's something to be said there, because all of the first Godfather is from the book The Godfather, and all of the flashbacks from The Godfather Part 2 are also from the book, and the modern day stuff is not in the book at all, nor is any of The Godfather Part 3. And I think the quality of they were written literally just for the movies so they could make more. And I didn't know that until I had seen all three of them, and The Godfather Part 3 is terrible. The modern day stuff in The Godfather Part 2 is still good. It just drags a little. It's not, I don't know. I think there's a decent difference in quality. But when I heard that they wrote that not from the book and that the flashbacks were, I was like, that makes so much sense. I'll do a few more. Pulp Fiction. I know I have the poster and the vinyl. I like Pulp Fiction. It's not Tarantino's best, in my opinion. I see why it's the cult classic it is, and it did a lot for the medium. I think it's a very influential and important film. I just don't personally. I don't know. I like it. Again, I feel okay. I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm gonna move on to the next question. How effective do you think deliberate shock value is in a film? What do you think determines the line between effective and distasteful? That's a really good question. Okay. So, let me think of a good example. I guess Game of Thrones reached. No. Okay, we'll compare Game of Thrones to The Walking Dead. All right. At least Game of Thrones' earlier seasons 1 through 4, when it was actually a great show. It's still good, but that's beside the point. Fuck, I lost my train of. Okay, yeah. Game of Thrones sets stuff up, and then when that stuff pays off, it's shocking partially because of the content of what's happening, someone being beheaded or whatnot. But also because all of that has been set up, it's emotionally satisfying. In The Walking Dead, people just die out of nowhere. There's no setup, there's no reason for it, it doesn't even have any consequences. It's literally just like, okay, this episode's kind of boring. What if we killed this character? And then people mourn for the first 10 minutes of the next episode, if that, and then it just moves along. I'll have to think about that a little more, because I think that's a really good topic. And there are more nuances I could touch on. But right now, thinking on the fly, that's sort of a way to illustrate the difference, I think. Do you prefer a plot-driven film or a character-driven film? I guess I prefer character-driven. Thinking about most of my favorite movies, they usually do focus on character more than anything, and the narrative sort of revolves around them. Yeah, I'll say character driven is better than plot driven, but that's not to discount all plot driven films. So something like 2001 is kind of an interesting case. I'm not even sure I'd call it plot driven. If anything, I guess that is a character driven film because all the characters are cold and detached and two-dimensional, which kind of almost goes against the idea of being character driven. But the fact that that's the point, that this robot character has more humanity than any of the human characters, I guess that okay, bad example. 2001 is a character driven whatever. Looking at my posters, I don't know. I guess Star Wars maybe started out as a plot-driven film and then became a character-driven trilogy. Because at this point, people only care about the characters. The plot is kind of very much secondary to that. What am I saying? Yeah, I guess most of the movies I like are character driven. I should also make a point. These posters aren't all my favorite movies. So yeah, I mentioned I like Pulp Fiction, but I don't love it. Star Wars is fine. It's good. I like it. But I don't love it. I think only 2 of the movies are really good. Fight Club is one of my favorites. I have a few of my favorites up here, but mostly I wanted to decorate this wall with posters that were sort of iconic, even if they weren't movies that I absolutely adore. And this made sense in my head when I ordered them and when I put them up, and I was like, hey, this looks nice. And then people got the impression that these were my favorite movies, and these are like Pulp Fiction, Fight Club, The Godfather, even The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is that's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That's The Dark Knight Rises. I didn't even order that one. It came with the Clockwork Orange poster. But my point is, I just wanted posters that were iconic images because I thought it'd make my room look nice. That's all there is to that. What aspect of film do you think is the most overlooked? Sound in general, the audio. Okay, so sound design is if we're going specifics, that's the most overlooked. But film has been, since The Jazz Singer, an audio or a visual and audio medium. And even before then, scores were still composed for films. And so often it's referred to as a visual medium. I'm sure I've referred to it as that. And it's both. And like Hitchcock had this quote where he's like, if your film only works if you can watch it with no sound and it'll still make sense, or something along those lines. And I think that that's kind of bullshit, because if you can turn off the audio and you'll still get everything out of the film, then why even have audio in the first place? You should be maximizing every aspect, and I don't think enough people do that. And it makes me grateful when a movie will do that. But yeah, so I'll say that's the most overlooked. So that concludes that Q&A. Those were all the questions asked. Those were some good questions, guys. I'm proud of you. I'm about to shoot this 50K subscriber Q&A as well. There's probably going to be some overlap in the answers there. But what am I saying? I don't know where I was going with that. Maybe that contextualizes. I guess I should apologize if you feel kind of like you're paying for this exclusive Q&A and then I answer the same questions on the public thing. Sorry about that if there's enough overlap where you feel like you're getting ripped off. I'll try to avoid that as best I can. That said, thank you for watching. Tune in to my regular videos, but also the next time I do a Q&A. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna end this.